Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the strange planet below. The world called Kepler 442c looked dead from space, but his sensors told a different story. Something big was buried under all that dirt and rock. "Captain, we're ready to go down," said Dr. Lisa Park, the team's expert on old alien stuff. She had been excited about this mission for weeks. The planet showed signs that someone had lived here a very long time ago. Jake nodded and looked at his crew. Tony Rodriguez, their best engineer, was checking his equipment one more time. Amy Chen, who handled all their communications, was already packed and ready to explore. "All right, people. Let's see what's down there," Jake said. The shuttle ride to the surface was quiet. Everyone knew this could be important. The Terran Federation had sent them here because satellites had spotted huge structures under the ground. If they were lucky, they might find something that would help humanity understand more about the galaxy. When they landed, Lisa immediately started setting up her scanning equipment. The readings made her eyes grow wide. "Jake, you need to see this," she called out. "These aren't just buildings. This whole area is one massive complex. It goes down for miles." Tony was already working on finding a way inside. After 2 hours of careful digging and cutting, he found what looked like a door. It was made of some kind of metal that didn't match anything in their databases. "The metal is still perfect after who knows how long," Tony said, running his hands over the smooth surface. Whatever made this knew what they were doing. Amy found strange symbols carved around the doorway. Her computer tried to translate them but came up with nothing. "Never seen writing like this before," she said. They finally got the door open. Everyone stopped and stared. Inside was a hall so big they couldn't see the end of it. The walls were covered with more symbols, and the ceiling glowed with a soft blue light that still worked after all this time. "How is this place still running?" Tony whispered. They walked deeper into the complex. Room after room was filled with strange machines and what looked like books made of crystal. Lisa carefully picked up one of the crystal objects and connected it to her scanner. "It's some kind of data storage," she said, "but the information density is incredible. One of these crystals could hold more data than our entire ship's computer." Jake felt something was wrong. This technology was too advanced. Even the mighty HFY Empire, the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, didn't have anything like this. "Lisa, how old do you think this place is?" he asked. She looked at her readings and frowned. "The dating is strange. Some of these materials suggest millions of years, but that can't be right. The galaxy's oldest known civilization is only about 50,000 years old." Amy was working on another part of the room when she called out, "Captain, I found something. This looks like it might be some kind of communication system." The device was a tall cylinder covered in the same strange symbols. When Amy touched it, the cylinder started to glow. Suddenly, images appeared in the air above it. Everyone stepped back as a figure appeared in the hologram. It looked human, but the clothes were different from anything they had ever seen. The person in the image started speaking, but the words were strange. "Can you translate it?" Jake asked Amy. "I'm trying, but it's like no language I know." "Wait, some of these sounds are familiar. It's like it's related to several Earth languages, but much older." The holographic person pointed to different parts of the room while talking. Then they pointed up at the ceiling and said something that made their face look very sad. The figure pointed to themselves, then made a gesture toward where Earth would be in space. "Did they just point toward Earth?" Lisa asked. Before anyone could answer, the figure in the hologram held up their hand. In their palm was a small device that projected what looked like a DNA strand. The structure looked exactly like human DNA. "That's impossible," Lisa said. "Humans have only been in space for a few hundred years. We couldn't have built this place." But as they watched, the holographic figure continued their message. They showed images of stars and planets, of great cities among the clouds, and of ships that could cross the galaxy in days instead of years. Then the images changed. They showed something terrible happening. Great machines that looked like metal moons were destroying everything. The figure's face showed fear and sadness as they pointed to the attacking machines. The last part of the message showed the figure doing something to their own head with a strange device. They looked peaceful afterward, but also different somehow. Empty, like they had forgotten something important. The figure pointed to the crystals around the room, then to the sky, then back to themselves. They said one word several times, and Amy's computer finally managed to translate it. "Children," Amy said quietly. "They keep saying, children." The hologram flickered and started to fade. The figure pointed one last time toward Earth's direction and said something else. The translation came through just as the image disappeared. The great forgetting. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ancient machines. Jake looked around at all the crystal storage devices, the advanced technology that still worked after millions of years, and the DNA evidence they had just seen. "Lisa, I want you to run every test you can on these crystals. Tony, map this entire complex. Amy, see if you can find more of these message systems." "What are you thinking, Captain?" Lisa asked. Jake stared at the spot where the hologram had been. "I'm thinking we just found out that humans aren't who we thought we were. And if that message was right, we forgot something very important a very long time ago." As his crew got to work, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they had just opened a door to something much bigger than an archaeological discovery. The person in that hologram had looked human, but they had also looked like someone saying goodbye. What had happened here millions of years ago? And why did it feel like they were supposed to find this place now? Outside, the empty planet kept its secrets, but inside the ancient archive, humanity was about to remember what it had chosen to forget. 6 months had passed since the discovery on Kepler 442c, and Dr. Lisa Park had not slept well since. She sat in her secret research lab, looking at data that made her question everything she knew about human history. Dr. Kevin Walsh, the best language expert she could find, was working at another desk. Next to him sat Dr. Nina Brooks, a scientist who studied the strange physics of space and time. All three of them had signed papers promising never to talk about their work. "Kevin, tell me you have good news," Lisa said, rubbing her tired eyes. Kevin looked up from his computer screen. "I found similar ruins on 3 more planets. Each one has the same symbols, the same technology, and the same human DNA traces." Nina added her findings. "The technology is beyond anything we understand. These gravity controls could move entire moons. The power sources are still working after millions of years. Whoever built this could have reshaped the galaxy." Lisa pulled up images from their latest discovery. "Look at this. We found weapon systems that could destroy a planet from the other side of the galaxy. Not blast it apart, but actually change its structure at the atomic level." All three scientists stared at the data. If ancient humans had built these things, why were modern humans struggling to colonize a few dozen worlds? Meanwhile, in the HFY Empire, Ambassador Korthoval was having his own problems. The HFY considered themselves the oldest and wisest race in the galaxy. They had been watching the stars when most other species were still primitive animals. But lately, the humans were acting strange. They kept going to dead worlds that the HFY had marked as uninteresting ruins thousands of years ago. Why would humans want to visit empty planets? "Send Agent Veltan to watch them," Korthval ordered. "I want to know what the humans are really doing." Back in the research lab, Kevin made a discovery that changed everything. He had been working day and night to translate the ancient language from the crystal recordings. "Lisa, Nina, you need to see this," he called out. His voice was shaking. The 2 women hurried over to his desk. Kevin had managed to translate several complete messages from the crystals. "This language isn't alien," Kevin said. "It's human. It's the ancestor of Latin, Greek, Chinese, and about 20 other Earth languages that we thought had nothing to do with each other." "That's impossible," Nina said. "Those languages developed separately on Earth." "That's what we thought," Kevin replied. "But look at this." He showed them his analysis. All of these languages have the same root words buried deep in their structure. Words for star, journey, home, and remember. Lisa felt her heart beating faster. "What do the messages say?" Kevin read from his translation. "They call themselves the first wanderers. They say they built cities on 10,000 worlds. They guided the growth of life on planets across the galaxy. They created and taught younger species. Created other species? Nina asked. Look at this part, Kevin continued. They mention the HFY by name. They say they helped the HFY develop their analytical minds. They mention the crystalline collective too, and how they taught them to process large amounts of information. Lisa sat down hard in her chair. Are you telling me that ancient humans created the other intelligent species in the galaxy? Kevin nodded. According to these records, yes. But then something terrible happened. They call it the Great War against the Dark Ones. They had to give up everything to win. Nina was reading over his shoulder. It says they made a choice. They could either keep their empire and let the galaxy be destroyed, or they could sacrifice everything to save it. So they chose to save the galaxy, Lisa said. More than that, Kevin replied. They chose to forget. They deliberately erased their own memories and retreated to one world, Earth. The three scientists sat in silence, trying to understand what this meant. Humans weren't a young species that had recently developed space travel. They were the descendants of the galaxy's greatest empire, but they had forgotten their own history. Why would they choose to forget? Nina asked. Kevin pulled up another translation. Because remembering would have driven them insane. The war was so terrible, the losses so great, that forgetting was the only way to survive. That night, something strange happened to Lisa. She woke up from a dream that felt more real than her waking life. In the dream, she stood on a platform in space, looking down at a beautiful blue and green world. Around her were humans with technology that seemed like magic. They were crying as they prepared to give up everything they had built. When she woke up, Lisa knew things about ancient technology that she had never learned. She understood how the power systems worked, how the gravity controls functioned, and why the crystals could store so much information. She wasn't the only one. Across human space, people were having similar dreams. Mechanics suddenly understood how to build engines that didn't exist yet. Farmers drew complex mathematical equations they had never seen. Children spoke words in the ancient language. Agent Veltan infiltrated one of the human research stations and stole partial data about the archaeological discoveries. But he only got fragments of the story. When he reported back to Ambassador Korthval, the HFY leadership became very angry. The humans claim they created us, Korthval said. This is either the greatest lie ever told, or they are planning to use this story to justify conquering the galaxy. Emperor Zethmaran called for all the data to be turned over to the HFY Empire immediately. When the Human Federation President Helen Carter refused, tensions began to rise across the galaxy. But Lisa and her team were discovering something even more important. The ancient sites weren't just ruins. They were still active, waiting for the right people to turn them on again. The systems are designed to respond only to human DNA and brainwaves, Nina reported. It's like they're waiting for us to come home. Kevin made the final, most disturbing discovery. The forgetting wasn't supposed to be permanent. These sites have been waiting for us to rediscover them. The ancient humans knew that someday, their descendants would need to remember. Remember? What? Lisa asked. Kevin looked at the data with fear in his eyes. Remember how to fight. Because according to these records, the war isn't over. The enemy is still out there and they're coming back. As if to prove his point, long-range sensors at the galaxy's edge began picking up strange readings. Something very large was moving in the empty space between galaxies heading toward them. The ancient humans hadn't just forgotten their past. They had been waiting for the day when their children would need to become the guardians of the galaxy once again. The secret was out, and the galaxy was not happy about it. Agent Veltan had stolen enough information to make the HFY Empire very angry, but not enough to understand the truth. Emperor Zethmoran read the partial reports and became furious. To him, it looked like humans were claiming to be the creators of all galactic civilization. This is impossible, the Emperor said to his council. Humans are barely out of their home system. Now they claim they built our empire. They must be planning to invade us. President Helen Carter of the Terran Federation tried to explain, but the Emperor would not listen. Give us all your data about these ruins, or we will take it by force, he demanded. We need time to study this properly, Carter replied. The implications are too important to rush, but the Emperor saw this as proof of human deception. Within days, HFY battle fleets were moving toward human space. The Crystalline Collective and the Void Swimmers, two other major powers, began choosing sides as rumors spread across the galaxy. Meanwhile, Dr. Lisa Park's team was making new discoveries every day. They had found 12 ancient sites so far, and each one revealed more advanced technology than the last. Engineer Carol Stevens was working alone in one of the newly discovered ruins when she accidentally touched a crystal panel she thought was inactive. The moment her skin made contact, the entire room came alive with light. Pain shot through Carol's head as information poured directly into her mind. She saw visions of the ancient human empire at its greatest height, thousands of worlds covered, with beautiful cities, ships that could cross the galaxy in hours, humans working alongside dozens of other species in perfect cooperation. Then she saw the war. The enemy came from outside the galaxy. They weren't alive in any way that made sense. They were machines, but not like any machine she knew. They consumed entire solar systems, turning matter and energy into more copies of themselves. The ancient humans called them the Devourers. They had already eaten 12 galaxies before they found this one. In her vision, Carol watched as the human empire fought desperately against the invasion. Every battle was a defeat. Every victory came at a terrible cost. The Devourers learned from each fight and became stronger. Finally, the greatest human leaders made the hardest choice in history. They could build a weapon powerful enough to stop the Devourers, but it would require sacrificing their entire civilization to power it. We choose to forget, said a woman who looked like Carol herself. Our children will start over, clean and innocent. But when the enemy returns, they will remember. They must remember. Carol woke up on the floor of the ancient room, with Dr. Park and Captain Jake Morrison kneeling beside her. Carol, what happened? Lisa asked. I saw it all, Carol said, her voice shaking. I saw the war. I know why they forgot, and I know why we're remembering now. She told them about the visions, about the Devourers, and about the weapon that had saved the galaxy at the cost of human civilization. The weapon didn't destroy the Devourers, Carol explained. It created a barrier around our galaxy to keep them out. But barriers don't last forever. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How long do we have? The barrier is weakening, Carol replied. That's why the ancient sites are activating now. That's why humans are starting to remember. It's all part of a plan that was set in motion millions of years ago. Across human space, more people were experiencing what Carol had gone through. Awakening events, they started calling them. Ordinary humans suddenly gaining knowledge and abilities they had never learned. Ship mechanic Pete Johnson started building engine modifications that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Teacher Martha Lopez began speaking fluent ancient languages she had never heard before. Children drew pictures of star maps showing routes to worlds that hadn't been discovered yet. The other galactic powers noticed these changes and became even more suspicious. To them, it looked like humans were preparing for something big. Admiral Paul Grant commanded the Federation fleet as 3 different armies gathered at their borders. The situation was getting worse by the day. Sir, reported his communications officer, the HFY are demanding we shut down all archaeological operations immediately. Tell them we're still investigating, Grant replied. Sir, they're not asking anymore. They're telling us. Grant looked at the tactical display showing enemy fleets surrounding human territory. If fighting started, humanity would be outnumbered 10-1. That's when something unexpected happened. A HFY ship tried to scan one of the human vessels, and its computers crashed. When they tried to target human ships with their weapons, the targeting system stopped working. Admiral, called out the tactical officer, the alien ships are having technical problems around us. Grant didn't understand it at first, but Carol Stevens did. The awakening wasn't just affecting humans. It was affecting all the technology that had been built using ancient human knowledge. The HFY don't realize it, Carol explained to the research team. But their computers are based on designs that ancient humans taught their ancestors. When awakened humans are nearby, those systems recognize the original creators. Dr. Kevin Walsh had been working on translating more ancient records. He made a discovery that explained everything. The other species aren't completely natural either, he reported. Ancient humans didn't just guide their evolution, they designed them. Designed them for what? Lisa asked. For war, Kevin replied. Each species was given specific abilities that would be needed to fight the Devourers. The HFY got analytical minds that could process battle data quickly. The crystallines could handle massive amounts of information. The void swimmers got the ability to work with dark matter and energy. So ancient humans created an entire galaxy of warriors? Jake asked. Not just warriors, Carol said, her awakened memories providing the answer. They created a family. Each species was meant to contribute their special abilities to the defense of the galaxy. But only humans could coordinate them all. The team realized they needed to find what the ancient records called the primary archive. According to their translations, it was hidden somewhere near the center of the galaxy and contained the full plan for defending against the Devourers. But first, they had to convince the galaxy that humans weren't their enemies. Emperor Zethmoran was preparing to order the attack on human space when his own scientists brought him disturbing news. Their deep space sensors had detected something massive moving in the void between galaxies. How massive? The Emperor asked. Larger than our biggest space stations, sir, and there are hundreds of them all heading this way. The Emperor stared at the sensor readings. Whatever was coming wasn't from their galaxy, and according to the data, it would arrive within months. For the first time since the crisis began, Zethmoran wondered if the humans might be telling the truth. If these ancient ruins really did belong to their ancestors, and if those ancestors had fought something terrible before, then maybe humanity wasn't the enemy. Maybe the real enemy was just now arriving. In the depths of space, the Devourers continued, their approach drawn by the weakening of the ancient barrier. They had waited millions of years for this moment. The children of the first wanderers were about to face the test their ancestors had prepared them for. The awakening was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Captain Rex Murphy stood on the bridge of his exploration ship New Horizon, watching his crew work with abilities they shouldn't have. His navigator, Lucy Adams, was plotting courses through space using star maps that existed only in her newly awakened memories. Engineer Dan Foster was modifying their engines with technology that wouldn't be invented for another 100 years. Captain, Lucy called out. I know where we need to go. There's something calling to us from the Galactic Center. Rex nodded. He could feel it too, like a voice in the back of his mind telling him to come home. All across human space, ship captains were reporting the same thing. Something was drawing them toward the center of the galaxy. Meanwhile, the situation with the other galactic powers was getting more complicated every day. Admiral Paul Grant watched his tactical screens as HFY, Crystalline, and Void Swimmer fleets took positions around human territory. Sir, reported Lieutenant Mike Torres, the alien fleets are having more technical problems. Their ships keep shutting down when they get too close to ours. Grant had seen the reports from the research teams. Human presence was causing ancient override codes to activate in alien technology. The other species had built their civilizations on foundations left by ancient humans, and now those foundations were responding to their creators' children. Emperor Zethmoran was growing frustrated. His most advanced warships were acting like broken toys around human vessels. His scientists couldn't explain why computers that had worked perfectly for thousands of years were suddenly obeying humans instead of HFY. Your Majesty, said his chief science advisor, we've analyzed the human claims about these ancient ruins. The evidence is becoming difficult to ignore. What evidence? The Emperor demanded. The technology in those ruins is identical to the base architecture of our own systems. Not similar, Your Majesty. Identical. As if our ancestors learned everything from the same source. The Emperor stared at the data. If this was true, it meant the HFY weren't the galaxy's oldest civilization. They were students who had forgotten. Their teachers, Dr. Lisa Park and her team, were racing to find the primary archive before the approaching crisis got worse. They had narrowed down its location to a region near the galactic core, but the area was dangerous and filled with strange energy readings. Carol Stevens, whose awakening had been the most complete so far, was serving as their guide. The ancient memories in her mind showed her glimpses of the great installation that contained all the knowledge of the first wanderers. "It's not just a library," she explained to the others. "It's a consciousness. The last of the ancient leaders chose to become part of the archive, waiting for us to return." Captain Jake Morrison was leading the expedition aboard his ship, now joined by Rex Murphy's vessel and 3 other human ships whose crews had experienced awakenings. As they approached the galactic center, they began to understand the true scale of what their ancestors had built. "Dear God," whispered Tony Rodriguez as he looked at the scanner readings. "There are installations everywhere. This whole region is one massive construction project." The structures were hidden, designed to look like natural phenomena, but awakened, human minds could see them clearly. Weapons platforms disguised as asteroids, communication arrays built into nebulae, power collectors wrapped around stars themselves. "Our ancestors turned the entire galactic core into a fortress," Jake said. Amy Chen was monitoring communications from across the galaxy when she picked up something that made her blood run cold. "Captain, I'm receiving distress signals from the edge of the galaxy. Multiple colonies are reporting attacks." The signals painted a terrifying picture. Massive objects had appeared at the galaxy's rim and were consuming everything in their path. Planets, stars, even the space between them was being devoured and converted into more of the attackers. "The Devourers," Carol said quietly. "They're here." News of the attacks spread quickly. The Crystalline Collective was the first to understand what was happening. Their ability to process vast amounts of data let them see the pattern clearly. "These are not ships," reported Crystal Singer Vexhan to the Emergency Galactic Council. "These are mobile factories. They consume matter and energy to create more of themselves. If they are not stopped, they will devour our entire galaxy." Emperor Zeth Moran found himself in an impossible position. His fleets were surrounding human space ready for war, while an unstoppable enemy was attacking from the galaxy's edge. "Your Majesty," urged his advisor, "we must choose. Fight the humans while the real enemy destroys everything, or trust them to help us survive." The Void Swimmers were the first to make contact with the Devourers, and they barely escaped to tell about it. Captain Driftwave reported to the Emergency Council with horror in his voice. "They are not alive, yet they think. They are not machines, yet they build themselves. They spoke to us, and their words were death itself. They said they have consumed 12 galaxies, and ours will be the 13th. As panic spread across civilized space, something remarkable happened. Human awakening events began occurring in other species too. HFY scientists suddenly understood concepts their minds had never been able to grasp. Crystalline processors found their abilities expanding beyond anything they had thought possible. Void Swimmers began manipulating dark matter in ways their people had only dreamed of. "It's happening," Carol explained to the research team. "The ancient humans built genetic triggers into all the species they created. When the time came for the final battle, everyone would awaken to their full potential." Dr. Kevin Walsh had been working around the clock to translate the most important ancient records. What he found changed everything. "The weapon our ancestors used before wasn't meant to destroy the Devourers," he reported. "It was meant to make them sleep, but the effect was always temporary." "How temporary?" Lisa asked. "About 10 million years," Kevin replied. "They've been sleeping in the void between galaxies, waiting for the barrier to weaken." Jake Morrison understood what this meant. So the ancient humans didn't defeat them. They just bought time for their children to grow up and get ready for the real fight. Rex Murphy's ship had reached the coordinates Carol's memories indicated for the primary archive. What they found there was beyond anything they had imagined. The installation was built inside an artificial planet, hollow and filled with technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics. At its center was a chamber containing something that looked like a person made of light. "I am Elena Vasquez," the figure said, speaking directly into their minds. Last commander of the first Wanderers, guardian of the archive, and your ancestor, waiting 10 million years for you to come home. Elena's consciousness had been preserved in the archive's systems, maintaining the ancient knowledge and watching over the galaxy, while humanity forgot and relearned how to reach for the stars. The Devourers have returned, Elena told them. But this time we are ready. The ancient weapon was only the first step. The real defense requires something we never had before. What's that? Jake asked. Unity, Elena replied. Every species working together, each contributing their special abilities to a plan that encompasses the entire galaxy. The HFY's analytical minds, the crystalline collective's processing power, the void swimmer's connection to dark space, and humanity's gift for bringing everyone together. As if summoned by her words, ships began arriving from across the galaxy. HFY vessels appeared first, followed by crystalline formations and void swimmer fleets. Emperor Zethmoran himself arrived aboard his flagship. Ancient One, the Emperor said, addressing Elena's glowing form, if you truly are our creator, then we pledge our service to this fight. Elena smiled, and her light seemed to warm the entire chamber. I am not your creator, Emperor. I am your grandmother, and I am proud of how strong my grandchildren have become. The galaxy's children had finally come home, just in time for the greatest battle in the history of the universe. The Devourers had reached the galaxy's outer arms, and the destruction was beyond anything the modern civilizations had ever imagined. Admiral Paul Grant watched the tactical displays with growing horror. Entire star systems were simply disappearing, converted into more Devourer machines within hours. These weren't battles in any sense he understood. They were harvesting operations. Sir, reported his communications officer, we're losing contact with the outer colonies. 17 systems have gone dark in the last 6 hours. Grant looked at the fleet assembled around the primary archive. Humans, HFY, crystallines, and void swimmers working together for the first time in galactic history. But would it be enough? Elena Vasquez's consciousness moved between the ships, coordinating the awakening of every species. Her 10 million years of waiting were finally over. The Devourers are not evil, she explained to the combined fleet commanders. They are hungry. They were created by a civilization that destroyed itself through greed, and now they consume everything because consumption is all they know. Captain Jake Morrison was coordinating the human ships when Elena appeared beside him as a hologram of light. Jake, your people must serve as the coordinators for what comes next. Only humans can interface with all the systems simultaneously. What systems? He asked. Elena gestured, and the space around the primary archive filled with light. Installations that had been hidden for millions of years revealed themselves. Weapons platforms, power collectors, communication networks, all connected in a web that spanned the entire galaxy. Your ancestors didn't just build a weapon, Elena said. They built a galaxy-wide defense system, but it requires representatives from each species to operate it. Emperor Zethmoran had brought his finest analysts to help coordinate the massive amounts of data flowing through the ancient networks. For the first time in HFY history, their logical minds were working in harmony with human intuition and alien perspectives. The scale is incredible, the Emperor reported. Every star, every planet, every major installation in the galaxy is part of this network. How did they build something so vast? They had time, Elena replied. And they knew what was coming. Crystal Singer Vexhan and her people were processing information streams that would have burned out any normal computer. The crystalline collective's abilities had grown far beyond what anyone thought possible as their awakening continued. I can see the pattern of the Devourer advance, Vexhan reported. They're not random. They're following specific routes, consuming systems in an order that will maximize their growth rate. Captain Driftwave of the Void Swimmers was working with technology that manipulated dark matter and dark energy directly. We can slow them down, he reported. Our dark matter manipulators can interfere with their movement between systems. But Carol Stevens, whose awakening had been the most complete, brought disturbing news. The Devourers aren't just machines, she said. They're learning. Each system they consume gives them more knowledge about our galaxy and our defenses. Elena nodded gravely. Yes. That's why the original weapon failed to destroy them permanently. They adapt, they grow, they become stronger. Rex Murphy was leading a scout fleet toward the approaching enemy when he made a discovery that changed their understanding completely. Elena, you need to see this, he transmitted back to the archive. The Devourers aren't just consuming matter and energy. They're consuming information itself. Memories, histories, entire cultures are being absorbed into them. Elena's light dimmed as she processed this information. Then they remember the last war. They know about our defenses. They're coming prepared this time. The situation grew worse. As reports came in from across the galaxy, the Devourers had split into multiple groups, attacking from different directions simultaneously. They were moving faster than anyone had predicted. At this rate, they'll reach the core systems within days, reported Admiral Grant. That's when Elena revealed the final truth about the ancient weapon. The galaxy-wide defense network can stop them, she said, but it requires a power source beyond anything you can imagine. What kind of power source? Jake asked. Elena's form flickered, showing the strain of maintaining her consciousness for so long. Life itself. The network needs the conscious will of every thinking being in the galaxy to power it. You mean we have to convince every person on every world to participate? Emperor Zethmoran asked. More than that, Elena replied. You have to convince them to risk everything. The weapon draws power from consciousness itself. Everyone who participates might not survive the process. The fleet commanders looked at each other in shock. They were asking billions of people to potentially sacrifice their lives to save the galaxy. There has to be another way, Jake said. There is, Elena replied. You can run. Some of you might escape to another galaxy, but the Devourers will follow. Eventually, and next time you won't have the defenses your ancestors built. Captain Morrison made the hardest decision of his life. Send the message to every world, every ship, every station in the galaxy. Tell them what we need. Tell them the choice is theirs. What happened next surprised everyone. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had been enemies just days before, people made the same choice. They volunteered. Families gathered around communication terminals to add their consciousness to the network. Children too young to understand fully still contributed because their parents explained it was important. Old people who had lived full lives gave everything they had left. The Zeph-High, who prized logic above all else, calculated that cooperation was the only rational choice. The crystalline collective processed the data and concluded that individual survival was meaningless. If civilization ended, the Void Swimmers, who understood the deep connections between all things, saw that saving the galaxy meant saving themselves. Even species that had been discovered only recently joined the network. Beings whose names humanity had never learned sent their consciousness across space to help power the ancient defense. Dr. Lisa Park was at one of the network interface stations when the power levels began to climb beyond anything the ancient designers had imagined. Elena, the energy readings are off the charts, she reported. We're getting more volunteers than the system was designed to handle. Elena's form grew brighter as the network came online. The ancestors never imagined this level of cooperation. They built the system assuming they would have to force participation. But your generation is choosing to work together. The moment of truth came when the Devourers reached the galaxy's middle regions. The ancient weapons powered up, drawing energy from billions of conscious minds across thousands of worlds. But something unexpected happened. Instead of destroying the Devourers, the weapon began transforming them. What's happening? Jake demanded. Elena's consciousness merged more deeply with the network as understanding dawned. The weapon isn't meant to destroy them, it's meant to cure them. The Devourers were once alive, once conscious like us. The hunger consumed their minds, but the core of what they were is still there. Across the galaxy, the Devourer machines began to change. The endless hunger that had driven them for millions of years was being replaced by memory of what they had once been. They remembered having homes, having families, having purposes beyond consumption. One by one, the massive Devourer installations stopped their advance. Some began helping to repair the damage they had caused. Others simply shut down, their consciousness finally at peace. The transformation took 3 days. When it was over, the galaxy was quiet. Jake Morrison stood in the primary archive looking at Elena's fading form. The effort of coordinating the galactic defense had exhausted even her preserved consciousness. "Is it over?" he asked. "This threat is over," Elena replied. "But the galaxy will face other challenges. The difference is that now you know you can face them together." Emperor Zethmaran approached with representatives from all the major species. "Ancient Mother, we pledge that the cooperation we've learned will not end with this crisis. We are stronger together than apart." Elena smiled one last time. That was always the plan. Not to create an empire, but to create a family. Her form began to fade as she finally allowed herself to rest after 10 million years of waiting. "Remember us not as conquerors, but as gardeners. We planted seeds of hope across the galaxy, and today we saw them bloom." As Elena's consciousness merged with the galactic network one final time, she left behind a legacy of unity that would last forever. The children of the first wanderers had grown up at last, and they had chosen love over fear, cooperation over conquest, on worlds across the galaxy. Beings of every species looked up at the stars and knew they were part of something greater. They were family, the children of ancient gardeners who had planted hope and watched it grow into salvation. Jake Morrison looked out at the combined fleet and smiled. Humanity had never been conquerors. They had always been the ones who brought everyone else home. The galaxy was safe, not because the strongest had won, but because everyone had chosen to fight together. That was the greatest victory of all.